The modern world is concerned with blood sugar. The numbers are difficult to ignore. Hundreds of millions of people now live with disrupted glucose metabolism. The pharmaceutical industry has built empires around this single biological variable. Insulin analogs, glucose monitors, medications that modulate pathways most patients will never understand. The interventions are sophisticated. They are expensive. They are, for many, essential. And yet in Okinawa, the Japanese island once famous for having the highest concentration of centenarians on Earth, there is a vegetable that has been eaten daily for generations. It is prepared stir-fried, served in soups, blended into teas. The locals call it Goya. In other parts of Asia, it is known as bitter melon. The name is not euphemism. This vegetable is aggressively, almost punitively bitter. The taste is so intense that most Westerners, upon first encounter, refuse a second bite. The bitterness is not a flaw. It is a signal. The same chemical signature that makes the plant difficult to eat is what makes it biologically active. Modern laboratory analysis has identified compounds in this vegetable that mimic the action of insulin. Not vaguely, not metaphorically. These molecules activate the same cellular pathways that pharmaceutical researchers have spent decades trying to target. The vegetable has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for centuries. It appears in traditional Chinese medicine. It is eaten across Africa and the Caribbean. The populations who consume it regularly are not consuming it despite its bitterness. They are consuming it because of what the bitterness represents. The question is not whether this vegetable has biological effects. The research is extensive. The traditional record is deep. The question is why a food that regulates glucose, that has fed some of the longest-lived populations in recorded history, became invisible to the countries now spending hundreds of billions of dollars on metabolic disease. The origins of this gourd trace to tropical Africa, though the timeline remains imprecise. What is certain is that by the 14th century, the plant had traveled. Trade routes carried it east to India and China. It moved through Southeast Asia. It crossed oceans with colonizers and the enslaved, arriving in the Caribbean and South America by the 16th and 17th centuries. Everywhere it went, it was cultivated. Everywhere it was cultivated, it was used for medicine. This pattern is unusual. Most food plants spread because they taste good. They become staples because people want to eat them. This vegetable spread despite tasting terrible. It spread because the people who grew it understood something about its function that would take modern science centuries to articulate. In India, Ayurvedic practitioners prescribed it for what the classical texts called prameha, a condition characterized by excessive urination and sweet-tasting urine. The description maps closely onto what modern medicine calls diabetes. The vegetable was not a minor remedy. It was central. Indian households grew it in kitchen gardens. Street vendors sold it in markets. The bitterness was managed through cooking techniques, pairing with spices, combining with yogurt, salting to draw out some of the harsh compounds. The applications were specific. This was not a cure-all. It was used for metabolic complaints, for digestive weakness, for conditions associated with heat and inflammation. The consistency of these applications across different Ayurvedic lineages suggests empirical observation rather than theoretical speculation. Practitioners used it because they saw results. In China, the vegetable entered the pharmacopoeia under different names, but with similar applications. Traditional Chinese medicine classified it as cooling, appropriate for conditions of excess heat. It was prescribed for fever, for thirst, for the constellation of symptoms that accompanied what we might now call metabolic dysfunction. The culinary tradition absorbed it as well. Southern Chinese cuisine developed recipes that balanced the bitterness with fermented black beans, garlic, and pork. The vegetable was eaten regularly, not as medicine, but as food that happened to be medicinal. Okinawa represents perhaps the most complete integration. The island's traditional diet, before the arrival of American fast food after World War II, was built around this vegetable and a small number of other local staples. The gourd appeared in the signature dish of the island, stir-fried with egg, tofu, and pork. It was consumed nearly daily, and the population that consumed it became famous. Researchers studying Okinawan longevity in the late 20th century documented extraordinary numbers. The island had more centenarians per capita than anywhere else on Earth. The rates of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer were fractions of Western averages. The traditional diet was not the only factor. Genetics, social structure, and physical activity all played roles, but the diet could not be ignored. And the diet included this vegetable at nearly every meal. The story was similar in the Caribbean. Enslaved Africans brought knowledge of the plant with them across the Atlantic. In Jamaica, Trinidad, and throughout the islands, it became embedded in local food culture. The preparation methods differed, sometimes stuffed, sometimes curried, sometimes stewed. But the vegetable remained. The Caribbean populations who continued eating it maintained their own traditions of use for blood sugar and digestive health. This is the pattern that demands attention. A single plant, spreading across 4 continents, adopted by cultures with no contact with one another, used for the same basic purposes: fever, digestion, blood sugar, metabolic regulation. The convergence is too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Different peoples, observing their own sick and their own healthy, reached the same conclusions about what this vegetable did. The knowledge was empirical. It was refined over generations. It was validated by outcomes. And then the modern food system arrived. The vegetable did not fail. It was simply incompatible with the system that replaced traditional food production. The first problem was taste. Industrial food processing optimized for palatability. Sweetness sold. Bitterness did not. The same chemical compounds that gave this gourd its biological activity made it difficult to market to populations unaccustomed to bitter flavors. Children refused it. Adults trained on processed foods found it unpleasant. Without cultural context, without the understanding that bitterness was the point, the vegetable had no appeal. This was not a minor obstacle. The modern food industry is built on repeat purchase. Products succeed when consumers want more. A vegetable that requires acquired taste, that actively resists enjoyment, cannot compete with engineered snacks designed to trigger craving. The gourd was not eliminated. It was simply never introduced. The second problem was logistics. Fresh, this vegetable is perishable. It does not ship well over long distances. It does not hold in warehouses for weeks. The supply chains that deliver bananas from Ecuador and apples from New Zealand are built for durability. They favor crops that can withstand handling, refrigeration, and time. This gourd bruises, it softens, it loses its texture within days of harvest. Industrial agriculture solved this problem for other crops through breeding and chemical treatment. But those solutions require investment, and investment requires projected returns. There was no projected return for a bitter vegetable with no existing Western market. The third problem was standardization. Modern nutrition science likes clean categories. It likes isolated compounds and single mechanisms. This vegetable contains dozens of bioactive molecules: Charantin, Polypeptide-p, Vicine, various flavonoids and phenolic compounds. They do not work in isolation. They work together, in ratios that vary with growing conditions, harvest time, and preparation method. This complexity makes clinical research difficult. It makes dosing imprecise. It makes regulatory approval complicated. A pharmaceutical company can patent a single molecule, synthesize it in controlled conditions, and sell it at scale. No one can patent a vegetable. No one can control its production. The economics offer no incentive to promote it, research it, or market it. The fourth problem was cultural positioning. In the countries where this gourd remained common, it was understood as food. Normal food, daily food, the kind of food that grandmothers prepared and children learned to tolerate. In the West, it was positioned as exotic, a curiosity found in ethnic grocery stores, photographed by food bloggers as a novelty, occasionally featured in articles about strange vegetables from around the world. This positioning matters. When a food is framed as foreign, it does not enter mainstream consumption. It remains a specialty item, available to those who seek it out but invisible to everyone else. The result was a quiet erasure. The populations who had eaten this vegetable for centuries continued eating it. The knowledge persisted in India, in China, in Okinawa, in the Caribbean. The seeds remained available. The cultivation methods were unchanged. Nothing about the plant itself had failed. But in the countries now experiencing epidemics of metabolic disease, the countries spending the most on diabetes treatment, on blood sugar monitoring, on pharmaceutical intervention, this vegetable remained unknown. The same nations that had industrialized food production, that had optimized for sweetness and convenience, that had built healthcare systems around managing the consequences of their diets, had never heard of a food that traditional cultures had used for exactly these purposes for 600 years. The plant did not disappear. The system simply never made room for it. The science, when researchers finally examined it, was unambiguous. This vegetable contains compounds that interact with glucose metabolism in measurable, replicable ways. The mechanisms are not mysterious. They are not folk belief dressed in modern language. They are biochemistry. The most studied compound is Charantin, a mixture of steroidal substances that has demonstrated hypoglycemic effects in laboratory settings. When administered to test subjects with elevated blood sugar, Charantin reduces glucose levels. The effect has been replicated across multiple studies in multiple countries using multiple methodologies. A second compound, Polypeptide-p, functions similarly to insulin. It facilitates the uptake of glucose into cells. This is not a vague analogy. The molecular mechanism parallels what synthetic insulin does. The vegetable contains a plant-based version of one of the most important hormones in human metabolism. A third class of compounds, Vicine and related molecules, affects carbohydrate processing in the digestive system. They slow the breakdown of complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. This flattens the glucose spike that follows a meal. The effect is similar to certain pharmaceutical interventions designed to manage post-meal blood sugar. What is striking is not that these compounds exist. Plants produce thousands of bioactive molecules. What is striking is the convergence. Multiple independent mechanisms, all targeting the same metabolic pathway, all present in a single food that humans have selected and cultivated for centuries. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when traditional food cultures optimize for health outcomes over generations. The research extends beyond blood sugar. Studies have examined the vegetable's effects on lipid profiles. Trials have shown reductions in triglycerides, reductions in LDL cholesterol, improvements in markers associated with cardiovascular risk. The effects are modest in some studies, significant in others. The variation likely reflects differences in preparation, dosage, and study population. But the direction is consistent. The vegetable appears to improve metabolic markers across multiple dimensions. The antioxidant content is substantial. High levels of vitamin C, phenolic compounds that neutralize reactive oxygen species, flavonoids associated with reduced inflammation. The combination matters for populations dealing with the chronic, low-grade inflammation that accompanies metabolic dysfunction. The vegetable is also extraordinarily nutrient-dense relative to its caloric content. High fiber, significant folate, potassium, vitamin A. For populations managing weight alongside blood sugar, this profile is valuable. It provides nutrition without caloric excess. The growing requirements are forgiving. This is a vine that thrives in warm climates with minimal intervention. It tolerates poor soil. It resists many common pests. It produces abundantly over a growing season that extends for months in suitable climates. Seeds are inexpensive and widely available. For home gardeners in tropical or subtropical regions, cultivation requires little expertise. The plant matures quickly. Fruits can be harvested within 2 months of planting. A single vine produces multiple gourds. The yield-to-effort ratio is favorable. There are caveats. The bitterness is genuine. It cannot be eliminated entirely, only reduced through technique. Salting, blanching, and pairing with strong flavors help. But the taste remains challenging for those encountering it for the first time. The blood sugar effects are real, which means interaction with diabetes medication is possible. Individuals already taking hypoglycemic drugs should approach with caution. The vegetable is not a replacement for medical care. It is a food with biological activity, and biological activity carries responsibility. Long-term consumption at very high doses has raised questions in some research. The same compounds that provide benefit in moderate amounts may cause problems in excess. This is true of most biologically active substances. Moderation is appropriate. None of these caveats diminish what the vegetable is. This is a food that has sustained populations for centuries. It has been studied by modern science and found to contain compounds that target the exact metabolic pathways now causing epidemics in the industrialized world. It grows easily, it costs little, it cannot be monopolized. What it requires is tolerance for bitterness and knowledge of how to prepare it. The plant is called bitter melon in English, Goya in Okinawa, Karela in India, Kugwa in Mandarin, Ampalaya in the Philippines, Cerasei in Jamaica. The names differ. The plant is the same. It grows as a climbing vine, reaching 10 feet or more if given support. The leaves are lobed, resembling a hand with spread fingers. The flowers are small and yellow. The fruit is oblong, covered in distinctive ridges and bumps, turning from green to orange as it ripens. Unripe, it is eaten as a vegetable. Overripe, the red seeds emerge, sweet and soft, eaten by birds who spread the plant to new locations. It still grows across the tropical world. In backyard gardens in India, trained up bamboo poles. In Okinawan kitchen plots, harvested before breakfast. In Caribbean yards, climbing chain-link fences. In Thai markets, piled in baskets beside chilies and lemongrass. In the West, it can be found in Asian grocery stores. The gourds sit in produce sections, warty and green, ignored by most shoppers who do not recognize them. The seeds are sold by specialty suppliers. They germinate readily in warm soil. The vines grow quickly with adequate water and sun. Preparation is straightforward. The vegetable is sliced thin, sometimes salted and drained to reduce bitterness. It is stir-fried with eggs in the Okinawan style. It is stuffed with spiced meat in Indian preparations. It is curried in the Caribbean. It is added to soups, to stews, to omelettes. The bitter flavor, once foreign, becomes familiar. Acquired tastes are called acquired for a reason. In the countries where it never disappeared, people continue eating it as they always have. They do not think of it as medicine. They think of it as food, food that happens to be good for them, food that their grandparents ate, food that their grandchildren will eat. The knowledge was never lost. It was simply never transmitted to the populations that needed it most. The people now struggling with blood sugar, with metabolic syndrome, with the consequences of industrial diets, these are the people who were never told about a vegetable that traditional cultures had used for exactly these purposes for centuries. The vegetable still grows. The seeds are still available. The preparation methods are still known. The traditional wisdom has been validated by modern research, compound by compound, mechanism by mechanism. It asks only to be recognized. The bitterness remains. It will not become sweet. It will not become easy. But easy was never the point. The plant is there, in the markets and the gardens, in the places where people still remember what food can do. It waits, as it has always waited, for those willing to taste what they have been avoiding.